Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks so much for joining us for this Tuesday's show. Looking at the warnings chart here, due to strong east winds gusting 35 to 40, in some cases high as 50 miles an hour, the eastern Beaufort Sea coast is under the influence of a blizzard warning, which will stay out until about 10 p.m. this evening. Visibility is reduced to near zero at times, snow and blowing snow there. And the remainder of the coastline, the central Beaufort Sea coast, in fact, all the way over to Point Lay and a little beyond, looking at winter weather advisories for conditions not as bad as the warning area, but still winds gusting 30 to 40 miles an hour and visibility is reduced to a half mile or less, snow and blowing snow. All these out until 10 p.m. this evening, in which case after midnight the winds will begin to slacken off and diminish a little bit. On the satellite imagery, several systems, the upper low down here, you can see pushing a band of pretty good showers into the southern southeast coast. Moderate rain at Sitka this afternoon. Ketchikan had ice pellets mixed in with the showers. And then some rain with this feature up here around Yakutat. As that pulled northward, that became a little more intermittent and showery during the afternoon. And also some sunshine scattered around from northeast Bristol Bay right up along the Kuskokwim Valley to the Tanana Valley there. Some high clouds in over the eastern portions of the central and eastern part of the Tanana Valley. And then upper level disturbance back through here, producing a narrow band of some light snow from northeast Norton Sound here, or eastern Norton Sound, right back up across the Kobuk Valley, Kotzebue catching a little bit of light snow today, and into the western Arctic coast. A lot of stratus low-top clouds here over the Bering Sea brought with a weak disturbance, some light snow at times at St. Paul, and then the stronger system down here to the south. You can see the one center back through here dropping southward and then dissolving. This one holding together pretty good. Rain and snow to Unalaska, up along portions of the Alaska Peninsula. The winds mostly from Nikolsky, gusting 35 to 40 miles per hour, and that back toward Adak and Atka a little bit there under high pressure, though not quite as much wind and some sunshine. There's a next front pushing in toward the far western Aleutians. That should bring some gale force winds to that area out there tomorrow. But this system here should begin to track eastward, stay south of Kodiak Island. Eventually this front will roll up in toward the northeast Pacific, in toward the Gulf of Alaska tomorrow night, and definitely push in toward the Panhandle on Thursday. On the chart, low up here near Prince William Sound, and then this other one here that brought the continued shower activity and pushed tonight, will bring the shower activity tonight to the southeast coast. Here's a stronger system back to the west, and then quite a gradient there between high pressure that's up off the chart and then the low pressure area here back toward Point Hope. And that giving those gusty winds as high as 50 miles an hour on the eastern Arctic coast with the snow and blowing snow occurring elsewhere. All along the Barrow had 3/4 of a mile visibility and snow and blowing snow at times this afternoon. Again, that'll improve after midnight tonight. Out to the west, high pressure here developing and heading eastward. You can see moves a little bit to the east here, kind of following this system in. Front just grazing southern Kodiak Island there, but the winds should kick up this evening and mostly looking at snow showers. A weak upper disturbance drops down as well. So pretty good chance of seeing some snow along with those winds gusting possibly as high as 40 miles an hour, at least for a short time here, mainly this evening. Then those will begin to drop off as a tighter gradient shifts over the Alaska Peninsula areas. And some flurries or scattered snow showers, really hit and miss up here over the interior. Mixed precipitation on the northern edge of this band, but mostly in the form of showers, and areas of light rain will still persist. That begins to kick through the area tomorrow as this low pulls off to the east there. And by afternoon, you could see an increase in the, probably won't see a chance of rain into the southern southeast coast until tomorrow night, and then more likely on Thursday. Otherwise, back to the west, high pressure over the eastern Bering Sea. Winds diminishing here over the eastern Aleutians, even the Alaska Peninsula, but tending to pick up here from the northeast. Could see some gale force winds there for Kodiak Island. Definitely from Sitkinak westward to about Sand Point. Pretty windy conditions, but lighter winds up along the Arctic coast tomorrow, down to maybe 15 to 30 miles an hour here on the east side, and even less back to the west, getting pretty light under high pressure. Diminishing winds for St. Lawrence Island and much of the northern Bering Sea. And then this system out here will begin to increase the winds late in the day tomorrow, with this high pushing eastward. We'll see on Thursday right up along the coastline. As a wave develops on this, you'll have the gale force winds diminishing definitely here as that low pulls eastward, and may see some gales, 25, 35 knot winds into the central Aleutians, but it won't be quite the wind producer. It will be back to the west. And this will be tracking actually a little farther to the north. And so late Thursday, those winds will go southeast over the Pribilofs, and another one developing behind that will move up. So it looks like starting Thursday, the winds will become southeasterly, so that ought to cause the sea ice to start shifting back to the north. Light winds along the coast, though, for Thursday, with a fair amount of sunshine in the downsloping areas here, right up the west side. Still those scattered snow showers or flurries around the interior, central and eastern areas, but nothing significant at all. And this front bringing rain to all of the southeast coast from the Queen Charlottes all the way up to Yakutat. Probably Cordova as well, and that moisture streaming westward into the Kenai Peninsula areas, and then showers following that in behind. Temperatures across the Panhandle, mid to upper 40s with a 42-degree reading at Skagway, 45 in Juneau, as well as down at Klawock in the Craig area. Lower 40s for the North Gulf Coast. Sept Homer had 46 today, 40 degrees up in the greater Gulkana area there in the Copper River Basin, and a 41 at Northway. Otherwise, 34, the mid-afternoon temperature at Fairbanks, lower 40s through the Susitna Valley, and farther to the north there is a 30-degree reading at Tanana, 31 at Bettles, 27 over at Fort Yukon, lower to mid-20s here for the Brooks Range, Arctic Village at 21, and most areas got above zero along the Arctic coast. That's Wainwright with 2 above, Barrow had 6, 3 degrees at Barter Island, and off to the west, 4 degrees at Point Lay with 6 at Cape Lisburne, 6 degrees and a little bit of light snow activity there at Kotzebue, 8 at Nome, with Tin City seeing 4 degrees, 10 degrees at Gamble. Otherwise, 39 there at McGrath. Contrast that with 28 at Anvik and 17 degrees at St. Michael. Teens there at Bethel, 18 degrees. Also at Macoriac, and heading southwest. Bristol Bay, see some sunshine here. Temperatures pushing up toward 40 degrees at Iliamna. Otherwise, it's 23 at Cape Newenham, 21 at St. George, and a 36-degree reading all the way from Unalaska, Atka, Adak, and Shimia, all reporting 36. Lows tonight, mid to upper 30s here across the Panhandle over to about Cordova. Then you get into the upper 20s to lower 30s for south central Alaska. Colder over the Copper River Basin areas, and right around 20 through the Tanana Valley there. Mid to upper 20s here over the west southwest interior. 25 forecast low for king salmon, and below 0 to 10 below up along the Arctic coast there, with near 0 readings here for the Seward Peninsula, but 8 at Savunga, 14 the forecast low for St. Paul, and upper 20s, lower 30s for the Aleutians. Highs for tomorrow, near or a little above 0, or maybe a shade below for the forecast highs there along the Arctic coast and the North Slope, but definitely milder south of the Brooks Range, upper 20s to mid 40s over the Tanana Valley areas. Eagle down to Northway, lower to mid 40s tomorrow, mid to upper 40s here for south central Alaska, and about what you saw today for the Panhandle, mid to upper 40s forecast again there tomorrow, with 22 the high for St. Paul, 35 for Unalaska, and 34 for Cold Bay, and then 35 to 40 out over the Aleutians. Flying weather, IFR possible early on here on the Bering Sea side of the eastern Aleutians and Alaska Peninsula. And then with that persistent area of moisture up there, look for some IFR from the western Arctic coast there, all the way down across Kotzebue Sound, the Selawik area, and in across eastern Norton Sound, and a little bit that possibly as far east as the western Koyukuk Valley, but conditions definitely better here off to the east. And marginal VFR all across much of the Bering Sea. A little bit of a break ahead of that next moisture band coming in with the front out west. And then this should not reach the coast before tomorrow night, the IFR, but look for marginal VFRs in the forecast for areas from Dixon Entrance all the way up across northern Lynn Canal, much of the Gulf of Alaska, and looks kind of marginal for all of the Alaska range. For passes, Anaktuvik should be good VFR in either approach. Same forecast for Adigan, VFR north and south. But for Lake Clark and Merrill, occasionally marginal tomorrow on either entrance. That same forecast good for Rainy, windy, marginal VFR. And for Isabel, marginal VFR at times. Mentasta looks a little marginal, as does Tanita, mostly on the eastern entrance, otherwise VFR. For Portage, marginal VFR, possible IFR in that eastern entrance. And for Chilkoot and White, occasionally marginal. Freezing levels, not much to see here at the surface down along the central Aleutians, nudging its way back into Bristol Bay and then hugging the coastline and across the southern panel at 2,000 feet as far north as possibly Sitka or Port Alexander. Icing threats with that next system, maybe a little bit fast here, but icing threats will begin to increase along the coast late tomorrow afternoon. Definitely staying still to the west. A little more likely that will be spreading into Kodiak Island, possibly the southern Kenai Peninsula, and some icing threats up over the northwest there, extending eastward with that leftover moisture, and then with the next front pushing in toward the far western Aleutians. And looking at the winds aloft, you can see the jet max ahead associated with that next storm that will be bringing the increase in the winds out to the west there. Another upper level low. One system, actually trough axis, coming down from the Pribilofs across eastern Aleutians this evening, and the main circulation about this position tomorrow, that keeping the jet mostly south of the area there, northern branch here, kind of ridging of high pressure, which will be moving east following this system, and then that will be coming eastward, dropping the winds off, making for a pretty good day along the west coast there on Thursday. And at 9,000 feet, low pressure south of Kodiak. Pretty brisk winds here, 40 knots, coming back around that into the east side of Kodiak midday tomorrow. Southwesterlies, the strongest southwesterlies staying off the coast there, just 15 to 20 knots along the panhandle as the last in a series of those troughs moves through. Pretty light up over the interior Arctic coast, still windy but not quite as windy. Really dropping off on the west side, still looking at those easterlies 30, 35 knots, central and western part of the coast, and some sort of brisk northwesterlies in across the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, but that all treading eastward, and high pressure coming in behind, and those strong southerlies, 40 knots, some cases 50 knots just east of Komodorsky Islands. And 50 knot winds at 3,000 feet there, very close to Attu Island, dropping back to 25 knots around Amchitka, and then northerlies on the eastern side of the high, 20 to 25 knots. Pretty windy here for Kodiak, 40 to 45 knot winds from the east, northeast, down Shelikof Strait, good to support some gales in that area, and southeasterlies 30 to 35 knots. And for turbulence, occasional moderate chop, Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Range, into the Gulf of Alaska, just creeping in toward the coastal areas of the Panhandle later in the day, and then still below 5,000 feet up along the Arctic coast of the light to isolated moderate variety, and then some severe turbulence getting rather close here to the far western Aleutian areas, but kind of a break here through the central areas, and the Pribilofs should be turbulence free all the way up through the Bering Strait into the Chukchi Sea. And after the segment, I'll be back with a look at the ice edge in the marine forecast.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
Welcome back. Well, the sea ice here from this area slowly diminishing, while areas off to the west kind of holding at a stationary status quo, and the ice just about all out of Bristol Bay now. And it looks like starting about Thursday, the winds are going to go southeast out here, and from Thursday on, that ought to start pulling things back to the north toward the end of the week and into the weekend. And ice over Cook Inlet still gradually diminishing. Southerlies 20 to 25 knots here across the southern southeast coast, otherwise 15 to 20 up to the north. Starting to see an increase there as that next front begins to approach the area. The inside waters looking lighter, 10 to 15 knots, mostly from the south and southeast. Then for Thursday, southeasterlies about 20 knots here. Could see some higher gusts, could be some small craft advisories possibly, but that front coming in doesn't look like it'll be that great of a wind producer, probably more of a rainfall maker than wind generator. Otherwise, the inside waters southeast 10 to 15, easterlies 20 to 25 up along the north coast. And for Cook Inlet tomorrow, northeasterlies 15 to 20 knots. Small craft advisories for northwesterlies for the Kamishak Bay area. Gales from the Barren Islands, northeasterly gales down across Kodiak and Chillicothe Strait, all under the influence of gale warnings tomorrow as that low center and that front kind of tightens the gradient up across this area, but dropping back to southeast 20 for the eastern Gulf Coast. And then for Thursday, easterlies at 20 knots, lighter winds now, the system having pulled off to the east, looking at northwesterlies, coming down to 25 knots here, all areas, Barren Islands, Kamishak Bay, even Chillicothe Strait, northwest or west-northwest, and north-northwest there on the east side of Kodiak Island. And for Bristol Bay, north at 15 tomorrow, so kind of light winds, but look for the gales here on the Pacific side from Sitkinak all the way over to Falls Pass there, Cape Sarachev, for 35-knot winds from the north and northwest. Small craft advisories here on the Bering side of the peninsula, 25 knots, and again lighter for Bristol Bay. And then for Thursday, under high pressure, these areas go light and variable here with that ridge axis right over the area. Northwest 20, increasing to 30 knots. In fact, could start the day out with gale force northwesterlies there southwest of Sitkinak, but light variable winds becoming southeast after Wednesday, and after Thursday. Northwest 20 to 25 for the Fox Islands tomorrow, dropping off west of Nikolsky there, swinging around on the other side of the high southeast, coming up to 15, Adak and Atka, and then gale force winds from the southeast coming into the far western Aleutians there, small craft advisories west of Adak. and that'll push eastward, and it'll weaken as it comes to the east, but still could be some minimum gales out ahead of the front. I'll call it southeast 30 knots there west of Nikolsky. Small craft advisories over to the AKwx area. Lighter southwesterlies 15 to 20 knots back to the west. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northerlies at 20, northwest 10 to 15, really laying down up here over the northern Bering Sea and St. Lawrence Island. And then late in the day, the winds coming southeast could kick up to 20 knots for the Pribilofs, and then that trend will continue through Thursday night into Friday and Saturday as well. Southeast 15 from the northern Bering Sea. Still looking at northerlies here along the southwest coast, and kind of a light variable breeze condition for St. Lawrence Island. Up along the Arctic coast, easterlies still pretty brisk wind advisory. Should lose the gales possibly after midnight tonight and go easterly 30 knots. All the way to Point Lay here, then much lighter, just 5 knots out of the north there, coming around those capes, and then northwest maybe up to 10 as it blows in toward Kotzebue Sound. And for Thursday, northeasterlies really laying down now, 10 to 15 knots, light northwest breeze on the west side. Still could hold on to 20-knot winds there toward Demarcation Point. For tonight, still a trough, one more coming in, bringing showers to the southeast coast, North Gulf Coast as well, and then tapering off back to the west and to the north. Just some hit and miss flurries here. Persistent band of light snow persisting over the northwest interior, and that winter storm or that blizzard warning still out until 10 p.m. for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. Those winter weather advisories should all end by midnight as the winds come down. And then for Wednesday, that low center pushing in toward the southern Gulf of Alaska. And it looks like that should get the rain into the panhandle by Thursday morning there, extending back to the west. Not much change over the interior, same sort of pattern, but high pressure laying the winds down here in the west. Have a great evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.